If stories like this, where four-legged heroes save the day and uncover hidden dangers, matter to you, hit that subscribe button on K9 Miracle Stories right now. We share unforgettable tales of K9 rescues that will keep you on the edge of your seat. The first thing Officer Dana Walker noticed was that Ace wasn't wagging his tail anymore. Just seconds earlier, the 3-year-old German Shepherd had been trotting at her side through the Saturday morning bustle of Crestview Harbor's fish market. Tongue lolling, ears relaxed, every inch a picture of an off-duty K9 enjoying his handler's day off. But now, every muscle in his body had gone rigid. His ears pitched forward. His head dropped slightly, nose quivering like a radio antenna locked on a faint signal. What could Ace have detected that Dana couldn't see? Something hidden in the crowd, waiting to strike? Dana slowed her pace, scanning the crowd. Vendors shouted over one another, waving glistening fillets toward customers. Seagulls screamed overhead, dive-bombing scraps. Somewhere, a knife thudded rhythmically against a wooden cutting board. Nothing about it looked unusual, but Ace didn't care about usual. His leash went taut. "Ace, heel," Dana said, keeping her voice light. He didn't so much as flick an ear in her direction. She tightened her grip, glancing down at him. His eyes were locked, not on a person, not on a stall, but somewhere beyond the rows of ice-filled coolers and buckets of shrimp. It wasn't the stare of a dog who'd caught the smell of tuna. It was the stare of a working K9 who'd just found something wrong. What dark secret was lurking just out of sight? "Easy, bud," Dana murmured, but in her gut, she knew this wasn't about to end easy. They had only been here because Dana's patrol shift had wrapped early. She'd been planning to grab a black coffee and maybe a loaf of sourdough from Martinez's bakery before heading home. Ace loved the market. The smells, the dropped scraps, the occasional pat from a fishmonger who'd met him during a bust. But whatever he'd picked up on now had nothing to do with food. He yanked the leash toward the far edge of the market, weaving between shoppers and folding tables stacked with fresh catch. Dana followed, muttering polite, "Excuse me," as she moved. The chatter of the crowd faded. The air grew quieter, heavier with salt and something else. Diesel, maybe. They were leaving the tourist-friendly stretch of harbor and heading into the older section, where the pilings were black with algae and the ropes creaked with every slow tug of the tide. "Ace," Dana said again, firmer this time. He didn't even blink. His whole body leaned toward the end of Pier 7, where a rust-scarred gangway led up to the deck of a hulking cargo ship. The name on the bow, Porter's Light, was faded almost to nothing. She knew this vessel. It had been moored here for years, a victim of some failed shipping venture, waiting to be stripped for scrap. No one went aboard, not legally, anyway. But Ace planted his paws at the foot of the gangway and barked once, a deep, sharp sound that hit her in the chest. Dana scanned the ship. Nothing moved on deck. She could hear the slap of water against the hull and the distant whine of a winch from another pier, but that was it. She clicked her radio. "Unit 12 at Pier 7, stand by." She kept her tone casual. No point spooking anyone who might be listening. "Ace," she said quietly. "What is it?" He whined just once, then surged forward, claws scrabbling against the worn wood as he tried to haul her up the gangway. Dana's first instinct was to tell him no, that they didn't have probable cause to board. But 7 years with the K9 unit had taught her one thing. You don't ignore a dog like Ace when he's ashore. The smell of diesel grew stronger as they stepped onto the sloping deck. Rust flaked under her boots. Coils of rope lay tangled in heaps. A gull shrieked overhead, startled by their sudden arrival. Ace moved fast now, head low, tail straight out. He zigzagged across the deck, pausing every few feet to sniff, then adjusting course like a living compass needle. They reached a hatch on the starboard side. The metal handle was corroded, but Ace pressed his nose against the seam and let out a soft, uneasy sound. Not a bark, not a growl, but something Dana rarely heard from him. It was worry. She leaned close to the hatch, pressing an ear to the cold metal. At first, she thought she was just hearing the creaks and groans of the old hull shifting against the water. But then there it was, a faint sound. It could have been the lap of a small wave in the bilge. Could have been the rattle of a chain. Or it could have been something alive. Dana stepped back, glancing at the gangway. No sign of anyone else. She unhooked the small flashlight from her belt and shined it at the rusted edges. There was no lock on the outside. Ace looked up at her, eyes bright and urgent. "All right, partner," she said softly. "Let's see what's got you spooked." Inside, the air was cooler, heavy with a mixed sense of damp wood, oil, and something faintly sweet, like fruit left too long in the sun. Her flashlight beam cut through dust motes as she moved between stacked crates. The labels were faded, stenciled letters half obscured by grime. Ace's nose worked overtime, pulling her deeper into the hold until he stopped in front of one crate in particular. It was wedged tight between two others, but something about it was off. Scratches ran along one side, fresh enough to leave pale marks in the wood. Dana crouched, running a hand along the boards. That's when she heard it again, louder now, unmistakable. A sound no cop ever forgets. A small, stifled whimper. What horror was hidden inside that crate? "Hey!" she said gently, her voice echoing in the hollow space. "Who's in there?" Silence. Ace lowered himself until his chest touched the floor, pressing his body against the crate as if trying to shield it. Dana's heart kicked harder. She pulled the multi-tool from her pocket and worked the pry bar end into the seam. The wood groaned as it shifted, nails squealing free. She opened just enough of a gap to shine her flashlight inside. A pale shape moved. Two wide eyes caught the light, then vanished behind a thin blanket. "Easy," Dana whispered. "It's okay. I'm here to help." Ace stayed perfectly still, his gaze locked on the opening. Slowly, a small hand appeared, gripping the edge of the blanket. Then, a voice barely more than a breath. "Please don't let him come back." Dana's throat tightened. She kept her tone steady. "You're safe now. We're going to get you out." The girl didn't answer. She just clutched a worn stuffed rabbit to her chest. Dana didn't push for details. "Not here. Not now." Instead, she clicked her radio, voice calm but clipped. "Unit 12 requesting immediate backup at Pier 7. No lights, no sirens. We have a possible missing juvenile on board an abandoned vessel." She eased the crate's panel wider. "Can you walk, sweetheart?" The girl shook her head. "Leg hurts." Dana's eyes darted to the lower corner. A length of thin rope was looped around her ankle, tied off to the crate's frame. Ace let out a low growl, not loud, but deep enough to make the hair on Dana's neck rise. She worked the rope loose, every muscle tight with focus. Somewhere above, a gull cried, the sound eerily like laughter. When the knot came free, Dana gently lifted the girl into her arms. She weighed next to nothing. Ace led the way back toward the hatch, moving slower now, as if guarding the retreat. Halfway across the deck, Dana's eyes caught movement along the distant pier. A man standing in the shadow of a piling, hands in his pockets, watching them. The second their eyes met, he turned and slipped into the crowd by the fish market. Dana's pulse spiked. Who was this shadowy figure, and what did he know? She keyed her mic. "Be advised, we may have a suspect heading east along the waterfront. Male, unknown race, dark jacket." Static answered her, then the voice of another officer. "Copy. Units en route." She didn't break stride. By the time they reached the gangway, the girl had buried her face against Dana's shoulder. Ace stayed glued to her side, ears flicking constantly, tracking sounds Dana couldn't hear. The market noise swelled again as they stepped off the ship. Vendors calling, knives chopping, the smell of fried shrimp drifting from a food truck. All of it felt too normal, given what had just happened. Backup officers closed in, one of them jogging toward the far edge of the pier to intercept the suspect. Dana headed straight for her cruiser, the girl still cradled in her arms. Ace hopped into the back seat without being told, immediately curling around the girl. When Dana set her down beside him, the girl's small hand found his fur and stayed there, her breathing slowing for the first time since Dana had seen her. Whatever had happened on that ship, Ace had found her before it could get worse. Dana didn't know the whole story yet, but she knew this much. Someone out there had just lost their prey. And thanks to Ace, this little girl had another chance to go home. The harbor police lot smelled faintly of salt water and gasoline, even with the wind cutting in from the bay. Dana pulled her cruiser into the secure side gate, bypassing the main entrance. Dana knew the first few hours after a rescue were critical, not just for evidence collection, but for trust. Push too hard now, and the child might shut down for good. She knelt so she was eye level. My name's Dana. This is Ace. He's my partner. The girl's gaze flicked toward Ace. He's a good listener, Dana went on. Sometimes better than me. For the first time, the girl's lips moved. He found me. It was so quiet Dana almost missed it. That's right, she said gently. He's very smart. The girl didn't elaborate, just tucked her knees up under the blanket. The door opened again, and Sergeant Mike Halpern stepped in, a tablet in hand. His barrel chest and weathered face made him look more like a dock worker than a cop. But Dana knew he could read a room better than most detectives. He took one look at the girl and lowered his voice. We'll keep it short. Just need some basics so we can find her people. Dana nodded. Sweetheart, Halpern said, crouching a little, can you tell me your name? The girl hesitated, glancing at Ace, then back at him. Lila, she whispered. Lila, he smiled softly. That's a pretty name. Do you remember your last name? She shook her head. That's okay. Do you remember where you live? Another shake. Halpern didn't push further. He looked at Dana and mouthed, we'll run her through the missing persons database. As he left, Dana stayed put, letting Ace take the lead. He inched closer until his head rested on Lila's knee. She lifted a small hand and began to stroke the fur between his ears, over and over, like she was memorizing the feel of him. It was a rhythm Dana had seen before in trauma survivors, self-soothing through repetition. While Lila sat with Ace, Dana stepped into the hallway to find Halpern at the computer. Anything? She asked. He shook his head. No match yet. If she's been reported missing, it either hasn't hit the system or it's under a different name. Dana thought about the man at the pier, the one watching us. Any luck from the other units? Negative. Disappeared into the crowd before we could get close. We've pulled harbor security footage, but it's grainy as hell in that section. Half the cameras are salt-blinded. Dana cursed under her breath. Back in the interview room, Lila was still petting Ace, her eyes distant. Dana decided to try a softer route. Hey, Lila, you like animals? A tiny nod. Dogs are my favorite, Dana said. You know why? Lila's gaze lifted slightly. They can hear and smell things we can't. They notice stuff, even when people try to hide it. Lila's hand still for a moment, then resumed stroking Ace's fur. He heard me, she murmured. Dana's throat tightened. The department's victim services coordinator arrived. Sharon, a middle-aged woman with a gentle voice and the ability to get information out of the most closed-off witnesses. Sharon sat on the floor a few feet from Lila, cross-legged, hands resting on her knees. I brought snacks, she said, sliding a small packet of animal crackers across the carpet. It was the first time Lila showed real hesitation before reaching for something. She glanced at Dana, then at Ace, before taking the pack. Ace! Ever the opportunist. Let his tongue loll, just enough to look interested. A faint smile tugged at Lila's mouth before she caught herself. While Sharon worked on building rapport, Dana stepped outside again to check in with Halpern. He was staring at the harbor map on his tablet. Here's the kicker, he said. The Porter's Light isn't just abandoned. It's been sealed for safety for months. Only Harbor Authority and scrap contractors have keys to the gangway lock, which means someone with access let her in, Dana finished. Or broke in and we didn't notice. Dana folded her arms. Either way, they picked that spot for a reason. Halpern's jaw flexed. Yeah, because no one goes looking inside a rusting death trap. By late afternoon, Lila had been checked by EMTs. No major injuries beyond a bruised ankle and some dehydration. She hadn't eaten in at least a day. Sharon suggested transferring her to the Children's Crisis Center for the night. Dana agreed, but she wasn't letting Ace out of Lila's sight until they got there. As they walked toward the unmarked SUV that would take them across town, Lila clung to Ace's harness, her little stuffed rabbit tucked under one arm. The wind had shifted, bringing in the smell of frying seafood from the market. Lila wrinkled her nose and pulled closer to Ace. Dana glanced toward Pier 7. The ship loomed there in the fading light, hulking and silent. But she couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere nearby, someone was watching again. The drive to the crisis center was quiet, except for the hum of the road. Lila's eyelids drooped, but every time the SUV slowed for a light, they snapped open. Dana caught her eye in the rear view. You're safe here. No one's going to take you. Lila looked at Ace instead. Because he'll hear them. Yeah, Dana said softly. Because he'll hear them. The crisis center was a converted Victorian house with a wraparound porch tucked behind a grove of old oak trees. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cinnamon and laundry detergent. A night counselor named Ryan introduced himself, explaining to Lila that she'd have her own room, her own bed, and if she wanted, Ace could visit tomorrow. Lila looked up at Dana, then back at Ace. Tomorrow? Dana smiled. Promise. Outside, as the SUV pulled away, Dana stood for a moment under the porch light, scanning the quiet street. Her phone buzzed. A text from Halpern. Piercam just pulled a better still of the guy. Sending now. The image loaded, grainy but clear enough to see a lean figure in a dark windbreaker. Head turned just enough of the camera to catch a partial profile. It wasn't anyone she recognized, but something about the stance, the casual lean against the piling, the way he'd watched, made her skin prickle. She saved the image and slipped the phone back into her pocket. Ace stood beside her, ears perked, eyes fixed down the dark stretch of road. You smell it too, don't you? She murmured. Ace didn't move, just kept watching. Dana reached down and rested her hand on his head. All right, partner. Let's go find out who's stalking our docks. By sunrise, the harbor was already awake. Forklifts beeping in reverse, gulls arguing over fish heads, hoses hissing along slick concrete. Dana parked beside the Harbor Authority office with a cardboard tray of coffees and a paper sack of breakfast sandwiches that would go cold before anyone remembered to eat them. Ace stood in the back seat, nose pressed to the cracked window, watching the docks like a sentry. Okay, partner, she said as she clipped his lead. We're not just walking the pier today. We're walking a timeline. Inside, the harbor office felt like every municipal building in America. Faded flags, laminated notices, a bulletin board layered with safety posters and softball sign-up sheets. Behind the counter, an administrator named Joyce, silver hair, sharp eyeglasses, took the coffee as if it were a subpoena she'd been waiting for. You brought Duncan? God bless. She sipped, scanned the email Halpern had sent overnight, and nodded toward a door marked Authorized Personnel. You want the gangway key log and contractor badges. We keep paper and digital both. City auditors trust paper more when things go sideways. Sideways is a word, Dana said. Ace lay sphinx still at her feet, while Joyce slid over a battered binder, whose plastic sleeves were fogged with salt air. The log entries were a parade of initials and timestamps. Harbor officers, scrap crews, one electrician troubleshooting deadlights on Pier 9. But for the porter's light, Pier 7, only 3 entries in the last 2 weeks. All legit, all men Dana or Halpern could vouch for. Could someone make a copy badge? Dana asked. Joyce tapped her screen. If they did, it wouldn't ping our system. But the chain lock on that gangway, only 3 keys. Me, Harbor Master Ruiz, and the city contractor who's cutting the vessel this fall. The lock wasn't cut, you said. No, Dana answered. Looked closed when we arrived, but Ace took me straight up. If it was locked, it wasn't for long. Joyce's mouth thinned. Then someone with hands on the chain figured out the rhythm. Some of the older locks don't show tampering if you know how to ease them. Can I keep a copy of these logs? You can keep the binder, Joyce said. I've already printed a fresh one. Outside, the air was a cold, bright blue that turned every rope shadow crisp. Ace leaned into the breeze and closed his eyes for a beat, like he was sorting smells into drawers. Diesel here, mackerel there, the copper tang of blood hosed from cutting tables. His ears tipped forward. Ready? They started with a fish market. Not the shiny front row where tourists snap photos, but the older line under corrugated roofing where the floor was scarred and slick. Dana flashed her badge and showed a blurry still from the pier camera. The man, leaning casual against the piling, face half turned. "Seen him?" she asked a Munger whose forearm. The Munger shrugged. "Cold, like the ice plant. Maybe a little clove, like those clove cigarettes kids used to think made them fancy." Clove. Dana snorted. At stall F, where the floor drains always backed up, an older woman with weather-cracked hands said she'd seen a man in a dark jacket making small talk with a delivery driver, but never picking up fish. At stall K, a teen slicing squid said he'd noticed a guy with a soft step and quiet shoes, the kind that didn't squeak. Soft step? Dana repeated. "Yeah, like he didn't want to be noticed by the floor," the kid said, as if that made perfect sense. Ace drifted between them, nose moving. When Dana gave him the seat cue, he nosed a stack of flattened cardboard, then the rubber mats, then a trash barrel where yesterday's scales clung like glitter. He sneezed, snorted, then stared toward the far end of the sheds where a narrow service path ran behind the stalls. He didn't pull that way. He simply looked committed, impatient, the way working dogs did when they were adding a pin to their private map. "Got it," Dana murmured. By 10. Halpern had joined her with a portable printer in his back seat and a box of fresh batteries nobody would remember to replace later. He handed Dana a sheaf of clearer stills from the pier cam. The suspect's jawline was there, the hint of a nose, the brim of a cap with a white graphic on the front. So worn it could have been a fish skeleton or just crack vinyl. State boys are running the image against anything they can scrape. Traffic cams, liquor store domes, you name it. Halpern said, "Don't hold your breath." "I'm not." She nodded at Ace. "So he's my algorithm." They walked Pier 7 again in daylight. Nothing about the Porter's light looked less haunted. The gangway chain hung neat. The lock face showed the usual crust. Nothing fresh. On deck, Ace traced their path from yesterday with a quiet certainty that made the back of Dana's neck prickle. He paused at the hatch where they had heard the whimper, laid down, and let out a breath that was more huff than sigh. "Tell me something I can put in a report," Halpern muttered. Dana crouched, ran a knuckle along a scrape she hadn't noticed before at the hatch frame. Fresh with fleck, tiny, as if the panel had been eased more than once. He was comfortable with this space, she said, not caring if she sounded like she was reading tea leaves. Comfortable enough to move in and out without banging metal. They checked the hold. The crate Lila had been tucked inside was empty now. Panel receded for the evidence crew, a green tag fluttering like seagrass from its corner. Dana's flashlight caught a small shine in the dust near the crate base. She pinched it up with a gloved hand, an oval of foil gold crimped. "Chocolate coin wrapper," Halpern said. "Not market stock," Dana answered. She'd eaten her share of free samples here on late tours. The pattern on the foil was a little ship's wheel, not the usual gold bar or dollar sign. Party store maybe, or a bribe to get a scared kid to move. Dana bagged it without comment. When they came back on deck, Ace planted near the rail and lifted his head, nostrils working in a steady pulse. The wind had shifted on shore. Human voices blurred together below, laughing, bargaining, gossip bench cadence that made the market feel like a town square. Ace seemed to sift through it all and set one cent aside like a book on a different shelf. His ears pricked. The low growl he kept mostly for himself vibrated right through the lead into Dana's hand. She followed the line of his nose across the alley of boats to the blockish building where the ice plant lived. No windows on the lower level, just a metal door and the hum of old compressors. She'd been there 100 times during cold storage checks. She never thought of it as anything but a cold cube. "Yeah," she said softly. "I was afraid you'd say that." They didn't storm it. They walked it. Around the back, the concrete stayed wet and slick all day from the melt runoff. An aluminum chute rattled as shrimp boxes slid into a waiting truck. The plant foreman, Elijah, a former linebacker who had slipped into middle age with belly and a smile, met them at the side door and frowned at the badge before he smiled at Ace. "You look serious today," he said to Dana, then to Ace, "and you look like you want a tour." "We need camera cover," Dana said. "Last 2 weeks. Back door, alley, the floor where you keep the extra bins." Elijah winced. "We got cams on the dock and in the machine room, not inside cold storage." People hate that big brother stuff when they're moving pallets. But sure, come see what we got inside. The cold hit like a wall. Dana's cheek stung. Her breath fogged. The air smelled clean and metallic, with a sharp ammonia note from the refrigeration. Ace's paws clacked lightly on the painted floor. His breath came slow and steady, the way it did when he was running hot, but calm. Elijah pulled up the dock feed. Faces came and went in grainy grayscale. Drivers in beanies, men in rubber aprons, a woman from the lunch truck hustling foil-wrapped burritos. A timestamp blinked at the bottom. Tuesday, 4:51 p.m. A man in a dark jacket stood just inside the shadow of the door, hands in pockets, cap low. He didn't look toward the camera. He looked at the floor. Soft step. Can we export that? Dana asked. USB or email? Elijah said, I can do both. The city never upgraded our software, so you're getting 2009 chic. Chic is fine. While Elijah worked, Ace wandered toward the corridor that led to the freezer rooms. He didn't paw or bark. He simply lowered his head and breathed, head moving barely an inch to the left, an inch to the right. Dana watched the microtells. The still tail, the weight shift, the muscles along his shoulders tightening like he was bracing under a scent heavier than cold air. She gave him a quiet work cue. He turned down the corridor and stopped a gray door. Room 2, the stencil read. No window, just frost around the gasket, where humid air met metal. The door was latched but not locked. Ace pressed his nose to the seam and drew in the air like a sommelier reading a glass. Then he looked back at Dana and gave a single deliberate huff. You smell clove? She asked Elijah, half teasing, half testing. Elijah shook his head. Smells like wet socks in their most days. Shrimp ice. Men who change their shirts in their cars. He dug for a ring of keys. You want in? You're going to freeze your badge off. 5 minutes tops without a coat. We'll be quick, Dana said. The door opened on a world of white. The hum got louder. The air slapped colder. Stack bins lined the walls. A floor drain in the center was rimmed with ice. Ace didn't rush. He set one paw, then the next, stopping dead 2 paces in. He angled toward the far corner where the wall panels met at a seam. He sniffed the junction, then the floor, then lifted his head higher, searching the top of the seam as if the smell rose light and stubborn. What is it? Elijah asked, crossing his arms against the cold. Air exchange, Dana said, pointing to a faint feather Frost disturbed at the gasket, an almost invisible curl, like someone had raised a panel and dropped it back. Or access. Or both. Inspector looked at those panels last year. Elijah said, the insulation's shot, but the structure is fine. No reason to. Ace made a sound that wasn't quite a growl and wasn't quite a whine. It was a sound he made in the surreal aisle of Dana's memory. Quiet warning wrapped around urgency. She traced the panel with gloved fingers. Tiny scratches scored the metal face. Too small for a pallet, too deliberate for a scrape. Fingernails, she thought, or a tool used careful. Get me maintenance, she told Elijah. Someone who can pop this with witnesses present. Elijah hustled. A minute later, a maintenance tech showed with a handheld driver and a practiced shrug. If we break it, I never saw you, he said, and began backing out fasteners that screamed a little in protest. The panel eased. A drift of colder air slid out. Impossible, given how cold the room already was. The space behind was dark. Ace stepped forward, nose tilted, and breathed in whatever lived in that thin pocket. He sneezed hard, shook his head once, then sat. Dana thumbed her flashlight and sent the beam into the seam. A narrow chase ran behind the wall, just wide enough for conduit and the wrong kind of imagination. At the bottom, a scrap of fabric lay snagged on a jag of insulation. Pink pill, the kind of fleece you bought 2 for $10 at a big box store. Dana bagged it, hand steady. You think somebody's using our wall as a hallway? The tech asked, half horrified, half impressed. Dana didn't answer. Her focus tunneled again, the way it had on the ship. The chamber smelled like cold and old cardboard, and there it was, faint as a memory. Sweet spice, not cinnamon. Clove. Ace stood. He put one paw lightly against the edge of the panel, as if to say, Here, this is where the path changes. Close it up for now, Dana. She gave one more scan down the service path. Empty. The back of the fish market loomed on one side, a wall of corrugated metal dented from decades of hand trucks and crates. On the other side, the harbor's chain link fence rattled with the occasional gust. Ready? She whispered. Ace didn't blink, didn't move. Dana eased the latch, pushing the shed door open just enough to slide her flashlight beam inside. The smell hit first. Damp wood, oil, and something faintly metallic like old coins left in seawater. Dust motes swirled in the narrow beam, catching on the edges of stacked plastic bins and coiled lines. It looked like a storage space for gear too worn to be worth repairing. Spare buoys, cracked ice chests, an old dolly with a flat tire. Then, at the far wall, Dana noticed something out of place. A sheet of plywood leaned against the studs, not flush, not nailed, just resting there. Ace's ears tipped forward, his head dropped low, nose sweeping side to side. Dana stepped in, letting the door fall half closed behind her. The shed was tight enough that Ace's back brushed the bins as he moved. His breathing changed, a sharper intake than a slow exhale. He stopped at the plywood, looked back at her. Dana kept her voice low. Show me. Ace pressed his nose to the seam where the board met the wall and pawed once, deliberate. His nail scraped the wood, and the sound made Dana's shoulders tighten. She wedged her fingers along the edge and pulled. The plywood shifted with a reluctant squeal, revealing a darker space beyond, a narrow cavity between the shed and the adjoining market wall. Her flashlight caught a glint on the ground. She knelt, sweeping the beam, a plastic water bottle half empty, a granola bar wrapper, and crumpled near the wall, a scrap of pink fleece with the same pilled texture as the fabric they'd pulled from the ice plant panel. Dana's pulse climbed. How many more hidden layers were there to this mystery? She reached for her radio. Unit 12 requesting crime scene. Service path behind market shed number 4. Possible connection to earlier scene. Advise plainclothes approach. Don't draw eyes from market side. Ace stayed planted at the opening, his nose working the cold, stale air. Then he froze. From beyond the plywood gap came the faintest sound, like cloth brushing against wood, not loud enough for anyone without his ears to catch. But Dana saw it register in his body, the stillness, the tight focus, the way his tail dropped another inch. She killed her flashlight. The shed went dark, except for the sliver of daylight at the door. The sound came again. This time Dana heard it just barely, a shift, a shuffle. Someone was on the other side of that wall. She motioned Ace back, clicked her radio twice. Silent code for possible suspect in earshot. Then she backed toward the door, slipping out into the alley. From there, she could see the line of market stalls and the gap between them that led to the public side. If someone slipped out that way, she'd only have seconds to catch them. Footsteps, soft, fast, coming from the shed. The market side erupted in the normal clamor. Vendors calling prices, crates thudding onto tables. A shadow crossed the gap. Dana moved. Police! Stop! The figure bolted into the crowd. Dark jacket, cap pulled low. She caught a flash of the brim's cracked white logo as he shoved between shoppers. Ace barked once, a deep, rolling sound, and launched forward, muscles surging against the lead. Dana gave the release command. He vanished into the press of bodies, weaving low, shouldering through like water, finding the fastest channel. Shouts erupted as people stumbled aside. Dana pushed through after him, hand near her holster, but not drawing yet. Not with this many civilians packed shoulder to shoulder. She caught glimpses of Ace's tail, then the man's jacket. He was fast, dodging between a table of crab pots and a stall stacked with citrus crates. The man glanced back once, eyes wide under the cap brim, before cutting hard toward the far pier. Ace hold. The dog angled his run, matching the suspect's turn. They broke free of the market crush into open dock. Footsteps pounded on the weathered planks, the sound bouncing off the water. Halfway down the pier, the man vaulted a coil of rope and disappeared between two moored trawlers. Dana closed the distance, Ace pulling her into the narrow slip. It was tighter than she expected, water lapping against hulls on both sides, the air thick with diesel and fish. The suspect was scrambling up the other side toward the pier beyond. Ace lunged, teeth snapping just short of the man's boot. The man kicked out, catching Ace's shoulder. The dog dropped back, regrouped, growl rising in his chest. Dana cleared the last few feet and grabbed the man's jacket. He twisted hard, slipping free of one sleeve and vaulting onto the next pier. She went after him, but by the time she cleared the railing, he was gone, swallowed into the maze of stacks, nets, and bait coolers. The sound of running feet faded into the wind. Dana stood there, breath sharp in her ears. Ace came to her side, panting, eyes still locked in the direction the man had gone. "You did good," she said, clipping the lead back. "We'll get him." Back at the shed, Halpern had arrived with two plainclothes officers. Crime scene tape fluttered in the breeze. Dana handed over the scrap of fleece. "Same fabric we pulled from the ice plant wall." Halpern frowned. "So our guy's been moving between hide spots. The ship, the plant, now the shed." "Means he's comfortable here," Dana said. "Knows the back paths, the blind spots." "Or works here," Halpern added. That thought sat heavy between them. Ace sat at the tape line, scanning the alley. His ears twitched with every clatter and shout from the market, but his gaze kept returning to the far pier. Dana crouched beside him. "You got a scent now, don't you?" He looked at her, then back toward the pier. "That's right. We'll find him." They spent the next hour canvassing the back stalls, showing the clearers still from the ice plant camera. One vendor thought the man might have worked odd jobs, unloading trucks. Cash only, never gave a name. Another swore she'd seen him talking with a night guard a few weeks back, but no one knew him, or no one wanted to admit they did. By mid-afternoon, Dana drove Ace back to the precinct. She wanted a shower, a hot meal, and an hour to clear her head, but none of that was happening. Not with Lila still in protective care, and a suspect moving like he owned the harbor. She parked in the K9 bay, unclipped Ace, and sat for a moment with the engine off. The building's brick wall threw a shadow over the cruiser, muffling the hum of the city. "You're leading this case, you know," she told him. "I'm just holding the pen." Ace leaned his head onto her shoulder. Inside, Halpern was already at the whiteboard, mapping out the three locations. Porter's Light, the ice plant, the market shed. Lines connected them like a triangle. "Close enough you could move between them in under 10 minutes, he said. "And tucked far enough off the main foot traffic that no one notices unless they're looking," Dana added. They marked the sighting points, the time stamps, the camera angles. Ace lay under the board, his eyes half closed, but his ears still working. Before Dana could sit down, her phone buzzed. A call from Sharon at the crisis center. "Dana? Lila asked if she could see Ace again today. Said she, remembered something she wants to tell him." "Tell him," Dana repeated. "That's what she said. Not you, him." Dana looked down at the dog, his eyes open, meeting hers. "All right," Dana said. "We'll be there in 20. The crisis center smelled of crayons and fresh laundry. Lila was in the art room, sitting at a low table covered in paper and markers. She lit up when she saw Ace, dropping her marker to wrap both arms around his neck. Dana crouched nearby. "Sharon says you remembered something." Lila kept her face buried in Ace's fur. "He was there," she whispered, "at the ice place." Dana's pulse ticked up. "You saw him?" She nodded against the dog's shoulder. "He had a key, and he smelled like those candies. The brown ones my mom doesn't let me eat." "Clove?" Dana asked. Lila nodded again. Ace stayed still, let her hold him as long as she needed. Back in the SUV, Dana scratched behind Ace's ear. "Clove candy. Key to the ice plant. That narrows it." Through the windshield, the harbor glinted in the late light. Somewhere in that maze of docks and sheds, their suspect was still moving, and now they had another piece of the map. Ace gave a single quiet huff. Dana started the engine. "Let's go find him." By the time the late afternoon sun dipped low over the harbor, the market had thinned. Vendors hosed down stalls. The last of the ice fish slid into plastic tubs, and gulls circled low for scraps. Dana sat in her cruiser near Pier 5, watching the day folding on itself. Ace lay in the back seat, head resting on his paws, but eyes open, following every shadow that moved along the dock. He wasn't relaxed. Dana had learned his version of rest was more like a coiled spring. Her radio crackled. Halpern's voice came through. Unit 12, we got a tip from Harbor Security. Possible match on your guy near the dry storage facility on Fulton Wharf. Plainclothes units are rolling. You in position? Dana glanced at Ace. Yeah, she said into the mic. We're moving. Fulton Wharf was different from the tourist piers. No bright awnings or clam chowder stalls, just long corrugated buildings, faded company names painted in block letters, and the smell of machine oil mixed with salt air. It was the kind of place where a stranger could disappear between a forklift and a stack of pallets without anyone blinking. She parked 2 blocks out, slipping into the back, locked through a gap in the chain-link fence. Ace trotted at her side, ears rotating like radar dishes. Stay close, she murmured. They approached the first warehouse. The front was locked, but a side service door stood ajar, just enough to show a sliver of darkness inside. A length of caution tape fluttered weakly above it. The kind crews leave up after repairs. Ace stopped, his head tilted, nostrils working. Dana listened. Inside, the space sounded empty. No hum of refrigeration, no clatter tools. But Ace took one slow step toward the door, then another. Dana's hand settled on the grip of her sidearm. All right, partner. Let's see what's behind curtain number 1. Inside, the air was cooler, stale, carrying a faint spice that pricked Dana's memory. Clove, just like Lila had said. The space opened into a wide floor of shelving and wooden crates, many marked with faded shipping labels. Dust lay thick on most surfaces. Ace moved ahead in a zigzag pattern, nose sweeping low, pausing at corners. He stopped suddenly at the base of a metal staircase that led up to a catwalk. His ears flattened slightly. A subtle tell Dana had learned meant he was catching scent from above. Up, she whispered. Ace took the first step before she'd even finished the word. The catwalk creaked under her boots. Light spilled in weakly from windows high on the wall. At the far end, a narrow office sat half hidden behind a row of shelves stacked with rope and tarps. The door was closed, but a thin strip of light glowed under it. Ace stopped a few feet short, sitting in that unnerving stillness he only used when he was certain. Dana leaned close to the door, listening. At first, nothing. Then the faintest sound, a soft, rhythmic tap. Not random, deliberate. She glanced down at Ace. His eyes were locked on the door. Dana took a slow breath, then nudged the handle with the side of her hand. Unlocked. She pushed the door open. The room smelled sharply of clove layered over with the musty scent of damp wood. A single chair sat by the window. On the floor, a cardboard box lay half open, filled with candy wrappers, the same brown and gold foil Lila had described. And on the desk, scattered photographs. She stepped closer, careful not to touch anything. The faces were all children, some playing in schoolyards, others walking along sidewalks, all taken from a distance. Her stomach tightened. What twisted network was behind these images? She pulled out her phone and started snapping quick frames for evidence. That's when she heard it. Another sound, not from the room, but from the floor below. A creak, slow, then a footstep. Ace moved instantly, planting himself at the door, head low, growl rolling from his chest. Dana holstered her phone and drew her weapon. The footstep came again, closer to the base of stairs. Police? Dana called out. Show me your hands. Silence. Then a sudden burst of motion. Feet pounding across the concrete. A door slamming open. Dana didn't hesitate. Ace, go. The dog shot down the stairs, claws scraping metal, a blur of black and tan. Dana followed, heart slamming in her ribs. She caught sight of a dark jacket disappearing through the side door into the alley between warehouses. Outside, the suspect cut left, sprinting toward the rear of the wharf. Ace was on him, closing the distance fast. The man hurdled a low stack of pallets, grabbed the edge of a shipping container, and tried to haul himself up. Ace launched, catching the man's pant leg in his teeth. The force pulled the suspect sideways into the gravel with a grunt. Dana closed the gap, weapon trained. Don't move. The man twisted, eyes flashing, pale, sharp, and cold. He lashed out with a boot, connecting with Ace's shoulder. Ace yelped, but didn't let go. Dana was on him in 2 steps, pinning the man's arm and wrenching it behind his back. Hands behind you now, she ordered, snapping cuffs on with practiced speed. The man's chest heaved. He didn't speak, just stared at the ground, like the fight was already over, or like he knew something she didn't. Halpern's voice crackled in her earpiece. Unit 12, talk to me. Suspect in custody, Dana said, breath short. Send back up to Fulton Wharf, South Lot. When the uniforms arrived, they took him without resistance. Dana knelt by Ace, checking his shoulder. The fur was ruffled, but he put weight on the leg without a flinch. Good boy, she murmured, scratching behind his ear. Real good boy. Ace licked her hand once, then looked toward the suspect as if to say, I'm not done with you yet. They brought the man back to the precinct. He gave his name as Peter Lane, but the ID in his wallet was clearly fake. Prints were running through every system available. Halpern slid a chair beside Dana's desk. The photos in that office? He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Lila? Dana asked. She's in 2 of them, Halpern confirmed. Same pink fleece. Dana exhaled slowly, the weight settling deeper. Hours later, Dana and Ace left the precinct. The harbor was quiet under a silvered moon, the water dark and restless. They stopped by the crisis center. Lila was asleep, curled up under her blanket, the stuffed rabbit tucked close. Sharon promised to tell her Ace had come by. Dana rested a hand on Ace's neck as they stepped back into the cool night. We got him in a cage now, she said, but I think there's more locked up in his head than we've seen. Ace gave a soft huff, and Dana knew they were only partway through the real fight. The interrogation room was as plain as a department could make it. Gray walls, 1 table, 3 chairs, and the faint buzz of the ceiling light. Dana sat across from a man who'd called himself Peter Lane, though the name meant nothing. He looked different without the cap and jacket, thinner, pale. His wrists were cuffed to a chain bolted in the middle of the table, but his posture was relaxed, almost casual, like he'd been here before. Halpern stood in the corner, arms crossed, letting Dana take point. A recorder on the table clicked softly as it rolled. You know why you're here, Dana said. The man's lips curled faintly. Trespassing? Kidnapping? Endangerment? And we'll get to the rest once we match your prints. He shrugged, eyes drifting to the observation mirror. You were seen on multiple parts of the harbor, Dana went on. Places known at business being an abandoned ship, the ice plant service corridors, a lock shed behind market, and you had photographs of children, including a little girl who disappeared 3 days before you showed up. The man's gaze flicked back to her. That's a lot of coincidence for you to stack up, officer. Detective, she corrected. He smiled thinly. Congratulations. From the hallway came a faint shuffle of claws on tile. Ace was lying just outside the door with another officer, quiet but close enough to scent the room. The dog had already spent the morning pacing whenever this man was in view, the fur along his spine rising in a way Dana didn't see often. She leaned forward. You picked the wrong harbor. My partner doesn't miss things. Not the smell of clove, not the sound of a child breathing behind a wall, not the route a man takes when he's trying to vanish between cameras. He found you before we even knew your name. The man's expression didn't change, but his jaw twitched, small, almost nothing. Halpern spoke for the first time. Why the candy wrappers, Lane? Some kind of signature? No answer. You know what's going to happen, Halpern continued. We're going to find the places you've been, the kids you've talked to, the ones you watched. You're not smart enough to cover every trail. Lane's eyes narrowed. You think I'm the only one? Dana's pulse picked up. Who else? He leaned back, the chair creaking under him. It's a big coast, detective. The interview hit a wall. Lane started answering with shrugs or silence. They took a break. In the hall, Dana crouched beside Ace. He knows more, she murmured. He's just waiting for something. Someone to bail him out. Ace's ears tipped forward, eyes locked on the door. Halpern joined her. We'll keep him on ice. See if he cracks when he realizes no one's coming. But Dana wasn't sure no one would come. Men like Lane didn't operate alone. By evening, they confirmed his prints matched an alias tied to a petty theft charge in Tacoma 5 years earlier. No fixed address, multiple dock worker IDs under different names. Halpern tossed a file onto Dana's desk. Guy's been moving up and down the coast like a ghost. And every time there's a gap in his history, there's a missing child report somewhere nearby. Patterns, Dana said. He's part of a pattern. Ace lay under the desk, tail thumping once when she said it, as if agreeing. They got the first call just before 9. A harbor watchman on the next pier over-reported someone trying to cut through the fence near a storage yard. By the time patrol got there, the intruder was gone, but the lock was sliced clean and a small maintenance boat was missing. Dana's gut clenched. He's got backup. Halpern frowned. Or someone who wants him out. Either way, they couldn't ignore it. They doubled security on Lane's cell block. Ace was restless, pacing whenever footsteps sounded from that direction. Twice Dana found him sitting by the holding cell door, ears pricked, eyes fixed on Lane through the bars. Lane would just smile at the dog, slow and knowing. Enjoy it while you can, Dana told him once. The next day, Sharon from the crisis center called again. Lila's been quieter, she said. But today, she drew something. I think you need to see it. When Dana arrived, Lila was in the art room again, paper spread in front of her. Ace went to her first, head low, letting her wrap her arms around him. On the page was a drawing of the harbor. 3 spots were circled in red crayon. A ship, a building with snowflakes on it. Dana guessed the ice plant, and what looked like a row of stalls underneath. Lila had drawn a small boat, black hull, white top. That boat, Lila said softly. I saw it. The man told me to get in, but I didn't. Dana showed the drawing to Halpern. If there's a boat, it's how he's been moving without being seen from the street side. They sent the harbor patrol out with the sketch. Within 2 hours, they found it moored in a forgotten slip behind an old fuel depot. Inside, another scrap of pink fleece, a handful of candy wrappers, and a cheap prepaid phone wrapped in plastic. The phone had only one number stored. And at 2:17 a.m., while Lane sat in his cell, that phone rang. Dana was there to answer it. She put it on speaker. Crestview Police. Who's this? Silence. Then a voice distorted, like it was coming through a fan. You have something of ours. Dana's eyes flicked to Ace. His head was up, ears forward, staring at the phone like it had teeth. Who is this? She asked. You'll know when it's time to trade, the voice said. Then the line went dead. By morning, they had a choice. Keep Lane in custody and brace for whoever was on the other end to make a move, or try to bait them into revealing themselves. Halpern leaned on the table in the briefing room. If we sit, we're reacting. If we move, we're exposed. Dana looked at Ace. He's never lost a cent. We'll let them think they're getting Lane back, and Ace follows it home. The room went quiet. You're talking a control release, Halpern said. More like a leash, Dana answered. And Ace holds it. They started planning. A transport van disguised as an interagency transfer would take Lane along the coast road toward a federal facility. If anyone came for him, they'd have to show themselves. Ace would be inside a separate vehicle, downwind, ready to track. It was risky. Lane might bolt. But every day they held him without a full charge, the legal noose loosened. And if the voice on the phone was right, Lane wasn't the top of this food chain. That afternoon, Dana walked Ace around the back lot. The wind off the bay carried a mix of diesel and tide. You ready for this? She asked. Ace gave a low huff, tail swaying once. Dana crouched to meet his eyes. You find where they take him. We end is somewhere inside the zombie building. Lane was probably smiling to himself, thinking he had a way out. But he hadn't met a dog who could turn a trail into a verdict, and Dana planned to let Ace do exactly that. The sky was still a slate gray when the transport van rolled out of the Crestview precinct lot. Rain had come in overnight, leaving the streets slick and the air heavy with the scent of wet asphalt and salt from the bay. Lane sat in the back of the van, cuffed, ankles shackled, flanked by 2 uniformed officers who'd been briefed to keep their expressions bored. In the lead SUV, Dana drove with Ace in the back. The shepherd standing with his head over her shoulder, eyes locked on the van ahead like he knew the plan was finally in motion. Not too close. Halpern's voice reminded over the radio from the trailing unit. If they're watching, we don't want to spook them. They're watching, Dana said quietly. You don't set up a trade without eyes on the package. Ace gave a low, almost imperceptible huff, his version of agreement. They took the coastal road, winding past the fishing pier, the old cannery, and a line of weather-beaten shacks that hadn't seen fresh paint in decades. It was the kind of route that kept them near water, near escape points, without ever fully leaving the town's working edges. Every so often, Dana checked the mirrors. Traffic was light, just a few delivery trucks, and an early morning bait van. Then she saw it. A gray pickup 2 cars back. Too clean for the weather, windows tinted darker than legal. Halpern, she murmured into the mic, gray Ford. 2 behind you. Tags are out of state. I see it, he said. The convoy turned onto a service road skirting the harbor warehouses. The pickup followed. At the far end, the road narrowed to one lane between stacks of shipping containers. Just ahead, the van slowed, brake lights blooming red. Talk to me, Dana said into the radio. Static. Then the van driver's voice. Blocked. Forklift in the lane. No operator in sight. Ace shifted his weight. Ears pricked. It happened fast. The pickup surged forward, cutting between Halpern's SUV and the van. 2 men jumped out, dark jackets, caps low. The rear doors of the van swung open. Move. Dana snapped. She swung the SUV to block the narrow gap between containers, tires squealing on wet asphalt. Ace was already up, muscles taut, eyes locked on the nearest man. Stay, she ordered, one hand on the latch of his harness. Lane was halfway out of the van, one man gripping his arm, the other scanning the road behind them. Police? Dana's voice cut across the clang of rain on metal. Hands up. One man bolted. The other shoved Lane forward and ran for the side alley between containers. Go! Dana released Ace. The shepherd hit the ground like a launched arrow, paws hammering the slick pavement. He took the corner tight, claws scraping, and vanished after the fleeing man. Dana sprinted after them, radioing their position. She rounded the corner in time to see Ace leap, catching the man just above the knee. They went down hard, sliding on the wet ground. The suspect swung a fist, but Ace was already back, barking sharp and loud, keeping him pinned until Dana closed the gap and wrenched his arms behind him. You're done, she said, cuffing him as he spat curses at the dog. Back at the van, Halpern had lain on the ground, handcuffed again. The second suspect, the one who tried to pull Lane out, was in custody. 2, tackled by one of the van officers before he got 3 steps. You're not going anywhere, Halpern told Lane, hauling him upright. And your friends here just bought themselves the same room you've got. Dana scanned the faces, the jackets, the mud on their boots. Harbor mud, same as the service path behind the market. They've been here a while, she said. They brought all 3 back to the precinct. By the time the paperwork was done, it was almost noon. Ace lay by Dana's desk, head by his paws, but his eyes stayed alert, following every movement in the squad room. Sharon called from the crisis center. Lila heard about the arrest on the radio. She wants to know if Ace will come see her. Dana smiled despite herself. Tell her we're on our way. The reunion was quiet but warm. Lila knelt on the playroom floor, arms around Ace's neck, her face pressed into his fur. You found them, she said softly. He found them, Dana corrected. I just kept up. Lila giggled, the sound small but real. I told you he hears everything. Later that day, Dana and Halpern stood at the end of Pier 7. The Porter's light rocked gently against its moorings, the gray water slapping at the hull. You think this shuts it down? Halpern asked. For here, maybe, Dana said. But if Lane's right, there's more along the coast. Halpern shook his head. One at a time, Walker. That's how we do it. Behind them, Ace sat in the drizzle, watching the harbor with that same steady focus he'd had from the start, as if he could still smell the trail of danger fading somewhere out there. That night, Dana sat on her porch with a cup of tea and Ace at her feet. The rain had stopped, leaving the air fresh and cool. You did it, she said, scratching behind his ear. You brought her home, and you kept this whole mess from slipping through our fingers. Ace leaned into her hand, the simple, solid weight of a partner who'd earned every moment of rest. Thank you for following the story of Ace, the K9 who refused to give up the trail. Do you believe dogs can sense danger long before we do? And if they can, have you ever experienced a moment where a dog protected you or someone you love? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this tale and don't want to miss more K9 miracle stories, please subscribe now. Many watch without hitting that button, but your support keeps these heroic stories coming.